Hello and welcome to Zeus Reviews. In this video we'll be looking at the XTU S6. It's an action camera that offers features similar to GoPro's lineup but at a fraction of the price. Let's take a closer look. The S6 comes packaged with a lot of accessories. If we take the cover off, we have the camera inside a waterproof case, which we'll put to the side for now. Beneath that is the user manual, and it's in color, which is kinda cool because they're usually in black and white. Also in the box is a USB charging cable, a couple of black zip ties, cleaning cloth for the lens and screen, a few Velcro straps, a whole host of different connectors and mounts, so you can stick this on a tripod or a helmet or a bike's handlebars or whatever you want really, a USB card reader, and a remote control with two buttons for taking either a picture or a video. The buttons are really satisfying to press, and little red light flashes when you press either one. Coming back to the camera, it's in this waterproof case with another mount already attached to the bottom. And the buttons are quite big and really easy to press, which is great because you won't have access to the touchscreen when it's in the case. To remove the camera, we lift off the black cover and pull it down, and the camera just pops out. So let's put the case away and take a look at this thing. On the front, you've got the lens with 1.4-inch screen. On the left side, you've got the speaker and a rubber flap labelled USB-C. Beneath this is the USB-C port and a micro HDMI port for showing your media on an external display. There's no HDMI cable in the box, so that's something you need to get yourself. As for the USB-C port, as you would expect, it's used to charge the camera. And for those of you who carry around portable chargers, you'll be pleased to note that you can still record and take pictures while the camera is being charged. But what I found really useful is that the USB-C port also supports external microphones, so you don't have to rely on the built-in microphone if you don't want to. Something else that's pretty cool is that if you connect this to your computer, you have the option to use it as a webcam. You don't need to install any drivers or software, it's just plug and play, which is really convenient. Continuing with the product tour, on the back is the 2-inch touchscreen with these two tiny lights in the bottom left corner. The top light is a charging light which turns red when charging and it turns off when fully charged. The bottom light is blue and it turns on when you switch the camera on. When you're recording, it slowly flashes so you know it's working even when the screen is off. On the right side are two buttons which control different functions on the camera. You can use them to navigate different menus and settings, and they each have their own shortcuts, which I'll show you later. They're really satisfying to press, and they're super clicky. Moving on to the top, we've got the power button on the left, which also acts as a shooting mode button. So hold this down to turn the camera on and off. Press it normally to bring up the different shooting modes, and this also acts as your back button when you're navigating through the menus. The button on the right is the capture button, which also lets you switch between screens. So hold the button down to switch between the front and the back screen. You can't have both screens running at the same time, unfortunately. Press it normally to start and stop recording or to take a picture, and this also acts as your select button when you're navigating the menus using the side buttons. The last thing on the top is the microphone, which is in between both of those buttons. Finally, if we flip it over to the bottom, we've got a 1/4-inch thread to connect us to different mounts or tripods, and we've got a spring-loaded cover that houses the battery and the microSD card. What's great is that the microSD card comes included with the camera, and it's a 64GB card, so it can hold a decent amount of media. If you need something more, the S6 supports cards up to 256GB. Now, there are a couple of things about the hardware I want to point out compared to the GoPro I usually use, which is a Hero 11 Black. For starters, the S6 is around 6 to 8mm shorter in every dimension than the GoPro, and it's a lot lighter at 92 grams compared to the GoPro's 154 grams. That makes it a lot more pocketable and easier to secure on smaller mounts without worrying about the weight shifting around. The GoPro definitely feels more like a premium product, but it also has a premium price tag to match. And while the S6 may feel a bit cheap and plasticky, I much prefer its clickier buttons compared to the GoPro's rubberized offerings. I also love that it comes with a 1/4-inch thread at the bottom because I can quickly attach it to a tripod without needing anything else. The GoPro doesn't have an easy way to do that without using an accessory or a case. Coming back to the S6, let's take a look at the software side of things. We long press the power button to turn it on and we're greeted by this user interface. The top left shows how much footage you can record, and the top right shows you the current battery level, along with various active settings like stabilization and whether it's recording audio or not. In some shooting modes, you also get a magnifying glass icon so you can zoom in and out. On the bottom right are the camera settings like turning Wi-Fi on and off, voice control, language, things like that. In the middle are your actual shooting settings, so this includes things like resolution, light balance, image quality, different filters, things like that. As you can probably tell, the touchscreen is a bit finicky at times and it doesn't always scroll properly or smoothly, but that's why the buttons on the side are so helpful. Coming back to the main screen, on the bottom left is your current shooting mode. So you've got a bunch of different video options and a few photo options as well, which we'll go through later. Finally, on the left side, we've got the gallery, which shows all the photos and videos you've taken so far. You can access the gallery by swiping right on the main screen. If you swipe left, you bring up the shooting settings again. If you swipe up, you bring the different shooting modes. And if you swipe down, you bring up a quick shortcut menu. From here, you can turn the Wi-Fi on or off, change the recording orientation from landscape to portrait and vice versa, connect it to the remote control, lock the camera, activate voice control, or turn the camera off. And finally, tapping anywhere on the screen hides the UI, so you get a clean look when recording content. As I mentioned before, you can use the buttons on the side here to navigate the menus as well, and they each have their own shortcuts. So pressing the bottom button opens up your shooting settings, holding it down opens up your camera settings. Pressing the top button brings up the camera settings again, and long pressing the top button turns the Wi-Fi on so you can connect it to your smartphone. As much as I like having these buttons, I think it would have been useful if we could customize them. Maybe that button could have been used as a shortcut to open the gallery or a way to cycle between your most used shooting modes. Speaking of which, the S6 has quite a few different shooting modes. For photos, you can take a normal photo, do a time-lapse, have it on a timer, take burst shots, or do a long exposure shot. When it comes to video, we've got the option to take a normal video, a time-lapse, slow motion video, night shots. You can use this as a dash cam. You can record a normal video and have it take pictures at the same time with a video plus photo option. And you have a separate mode for when you use this in the waterproof case. And like I mentioned before, you can also connect this to your computer and use it as a webcam. Each shooting mode has its own settings, so you can really make sure you get the exact shot you're looking for. If we select normal video, for example, and then tap on the middle here, we can take a look at what we can change. The resolution goes from 720p all the way up to 4K, with frames per second ranging from 30 FPS to 240 FPS for super slow motion video, but that's only for 720p. Now, I usually shoot all my content at 1080p at 60 frames per second because I think it's the most accessible format for the majority of people who watch my videos. But for this camera, I would recommend you shoot at 2.7K or higher because anything less than that somehow comes out choppy and pixelated, even if you adjust the settings. I will of course show you different samples later in this video. Now, you may have noticed that some of the options have Superview, which you would assume is super wide angle. But it's not. Instead, it just kind of vertically squishes your video to give the illusion of a super wide angle shot without actually widening the field of view in any way. For example, let's take a look at my Spider-Man figure here. I've made a little border on each side of things that aren't in shot. I'm shooting this at normal 4K. If I switch over to 4K Superview, Spider-Man gets squished, but you don't really see anything more in the shot. It doesn't widen the angle at all. If we compare it to the GoPro, this is what it looks like at normal settings. If I switch to wide angle, I can see a bit of the edges. If I switch to Superview, I can see a lot more, even if it does get that fisheye effect. The XTU S6 doesn't do anything like that, so branding it as Superview feels a bit disingenuous. Coming back to the shooting settings, other settings include choosing how long it should record for with segments, and you can turn the microphone on or off as well. You can also turn the lens distortion correction on or off, which basically crops in a tiny bit to avoid your videos having a fisheye effect. You can adjust the electronic image stabilization by either turning it off, having it set to normal, super, or gyro data, which supports the GyroFlow software. Apart from that, you've got different settings like exposure, ISO, white balance, contrast, saturation, different filters, and things like that. So there are quite a few settings you can adjust for each shooting mode, which lets you fine-tune and control your shot. So let's take a look at a few photo and video samples and see how things look. This is what it looks like at 4K 30 frames per second, which is the highest quality you can get on this little action camera. Stabilization is on, so hopefully you're getting a smooth video. We'll also record something with the stabilization off, so you can see just how shaky it is when I'm just walking. I'm not even running. This is now recording at 4K 30 frames per second with stabilization turned off. I'm just walking, I'm not running, and hopefully the image and the video quality isn't too shaky. The weather is lovely, by the way. Just walking along the river. This is now recording at 4K 30 frames per second in Superview. Looking at the tiny screen, it seems like the image is a bit squished vertically. I don't know if it's actually doing a proper wide angle or if it's just pretending to do one. And the sky seems to be really bright, even though in reality it's just kind of grey. So we'll see how it's handling the light balance as well. But apart from that, video quality looks surprisingly good, and I hope, again, that the microphone is picking up my voice clearly. This is now recording at 2.7K 30 frames per second. Stabilization is set to normal, which seems to be the best stabilization. You can choose between having stabilization off, set it to normal, set it to super, or set it to gyro, which supports the gyroflow software. I've never used it, but I think normal seems to be the best balance of quality and stabilization. We're now shooting this at 1440p, 60 frames per second, so hopefully it should be a lot smoother than 30 frames per second. Even if the quality is less than 4K. It seems to be quite bright on the little screen at the back here. And colour is bright, it's vivid, it's popping, which is quite lovely to see, especially in this weather. This is 1440p at 30 frames per second. So it should be the same quality as the previous clip you just watched, just at a lower frame rate. So maybe it won't be as smooth as 60 FPS, but we'll see how it goes. I'm shooting this at 1440p, 60 frames per second with stabilization set to super, and I'm just walking. If I start jogging, it starts shaking a bit, but the quality's still pretty good. And now we're back to walking. That's my exercise done for the day. This is 1080p at 60 frames per second, which is the format that I shoot most of my content in. Seems to be looking good on the little screen at the back. Again, stabilization is set to normal. We're now shooting at 1080p, 60 frames per second, Superview. So again, on the screen at the back, the image does appear to be squished, and I don't know if it's adding anything to the wide angle. I don't think it's changing my field of view at all. Finally, we are at 720p, 60 frames per second. You can go lower than this, which is 720p, 30 frames per second, but I wouldn't recommend it. In fact, I wouldn't recommend shooting at 720 at all. Even if you want to try the super slow motion, which is 240 FPS, the quality is just not good enough for you to use that footage for anything really. Overall, I think the S6 takes some excellent videos, but only if you shoot at 2.7K or higher. 1080p video just looks pixelated and grainy, so I really wouldn't recommend it. I am impressed by the microphone quality though, and I think stabilization is also pretty good, even though it does lower the recording quality a tiny bit. I also took a few photos with the S6, and again, it can take some really great shots, especially when there's a lot of light. There's a bit of a delay between pressing the shutter button and it taking a picture, so make sure you wait for a couple of seconds whenever you take a photo, otherwise it will come out blurry. In situations where there's not much light, photos and videos are quite noisy and there's not a great amount of detail either. Finally, I am recording this on the GoPro at 1080p 60 frames per second. I'm recording the exact same thing on the XTU S6 as well, just to see what the video looks like on both, and we'll do a comparison when I get home. I'm just walking very slowly. Hopefully the video is nice and smooth. Stabilization is set to normal on both. And we'll see how both of these cameras can handle stabilization, overall video quality. Let's see how they're handling sound as well. I'll switch between the microphones. It's a bit windy and there is some rain, so you might get a lot of background noise, but again, we'll see what it sounds like when I get home. And we'll see how they can handle a shift in going from a dark setting to something really bright. But so far, the screens at the back look pretty good, quality looks nice, colors are really vivid, and it seems to be pretty smooth even though I'm just walking slowly. I wonder if you can hear that bird, that's really aggressive right now. Comparing the video footage from the GoPro and the S6, I think it's clear that the GoPro is better, whether you look at stabilization, color grading, or just overall quality. But it is also a lot more expensive, even if you get one second hand. The S6 is definitely more affordable. It comes with a lot of accessories and the microSD card, so you don't need to buy anything else to start shooting. The quality might not be as good as a GoPro, but it's still pretty impressive, especially if you've got the right lighting. If you're looking to get a cheap action camera for casual use or for personal use like family get-togethers, then the S6 is a great choice. If you need to capture high quality content for a professional setting, then I would suggest spending a tiny bit more and trying to get a second-hand GoPro or a similar camera. I think it would definitely be worth the price. And that brings us to the end of the review. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're safe and well wherever you are in the world. This has been Zaeem Siddiqui from Zeus Reviews, over and out.